Welcome to the simplicity of happiness when more is too much. This podcast offers tips and techniques for a better life.
And before we start with another episode of the Simplicity of Happiness podcast, I would like to remind you that you can find out all about me and my thoughts on simplicityofhappiness.com, as well as Patreon, where I am providing extra content for all of you who support me and the education of children in Africa. And now relax and enjoy the show. Well, hello and welcome back to another episode of the Simplicity of Happiness. And I am thrilled that I have a guest where I was a guest before. So welcome, Carlos and Susanne. Hello.
Hey, how are you? Good to see you again.
Yeah, and if you are curious what they are up to, you can listen to their podcast. Have a look at their website. I forgot which episode it was. It was published, I think, the week that we are recording this. I will link it in the show notes. So if you want to find more out about them, visit the website and the podcast. By the way, the website. It's called Carlos and Susanne, right?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Why is that? Who's supposed to know what you're doing if it's called Carlos and Susanne? I thought it's a Mexican dance couple.
It could be. What we're doing is really based on the lives we've lived and the experience we've had in our 26 years of marriage. So when we were looking at different URLs, we really focus on what we call life design. And so when we were looking at that, life design is kind of taken. And so we thought, well, Carlos and Suzanne is pretty unique. Let's go with that and then talk about life design off of that.
Well, at least I knew who I was talking to.
There you
Exactly.
go.
Talking of life design, I see a very strange apartment behind you. What's up with that?
Well, we have 4 children. Our last one graduated from high school a year ago. And so we had spent about 2 years talking about what that was going to look like when we became empty nesters. We had this large home that we had raised 4 kids in and half their friends. And I didn't want to clean it anymore, for starters. And we just didn't use it. And I just thought it's just it's a waste. Like it met our needs when we needed it, but now we don't need it anymore. So I knew we wanted to sell the house. We just didn't know what we wanted to do. So we had talked about a lot of things. And this, of course, was pre-corona. And then we're planning to buy this little cabin way upstate New York in the Adirondack Mountains. And so we put our house on the market and our house sold, and then the cabin deal fell through and we had already sold our house. So we'd been talking about getting an RV regardless. It's something that we love to do. We did it a lot with our best friends who also were our next door neighbors. And so we just thought, well, I mean, we've talked about buying one anyway. Let's just buy it and we'll live in it full time. And so that's how that sort of came about. And we actually love it. It is small, it's easy to clean, and we just had fun traveling and spending a lot of time together. And so, yeah, we live full time in a little 35-foot RV.
And so that is what you're seeing behind you.
Yes.
Yeah. Talking of life design, downsizing from a house full of people to an RV. What is the life design part about this? It sounds like simplifying.
Absolutely. And I really felt that I kind of lived my life that way already, not super materialistic. I'm, always felt like I was simplifying. What I found out when I had to, had about 3 days to clear out our house and get it on the market, that we actually, in 26 years, plus some of our childhood stuff, we actually did have way more stuff than I thought we had. And so I will say it was I call it the Great Purge. And we did allow ourselves, we have a little 10 by 10 storage unit. I have
10 by 10 meters.
10 by 10 feet. So
Yeah,
I don't know what that is in meters.
So about 3.5 by 3.5 meters.
Yeah, that's pretty small. And I would say that most of what we have is our kids. I have tons and tons of photo albums, and we had kids back in the VHS days. I had videotapes. I did have a bin for each of my kids of their childhood stuff that I'm holding on for them. But so there were some things I can simplify, but I'm not gonna throw out all my memories of raising my children. So that stuff was important for me to keep. I just can't keep it in the RV. And then we pretty much sold or gave away everything.
Yeah.
Everything.
Yeah, we did simplify. And I will say since that, in the almost 7 months now we've lived in the RV, there hasn't been a day where I'm like, oh, I wish we had that.
Yeah.
And so when people ask me about what do you love about what you're doing, I tell them it's the simplification of it. We just took only what we needed, and it's been awesome.
Honestly, nothing that you miss?
No. There's one thing, but I'll get those back in June, is last summer I left 3 of my fishing poles in upstate New York when we were vacationing, and our friends picked them up for us. So those are really the only things I miss. And in reality, there's probably only been about 4 days I could have used them, but that has nothing to do with simplification. It's just my forgetfulness.
Right. Yeah. And there may be a couple of tokeny things that I thought, oh, we just don't have room. I wouldn't bring it on board, but I would now. And then on the other side, we did bring stuff on the RV that I ended up getting rid of because we didn't need it. And so we are very conscious of anything that we bring in, something goes out. And, I always figure giving things away to someone, if I'm not using it, the best thing I can do is give it away to somebody who will use it.
Yeah, it might be more about using than about owning.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
What
is the most valuable item that you have with you? It can be 2 different ones.
Yeah. Oh, it'll be different.
Yeah, I say it's the one I wear on my finger. It's this ring. Because it's more than just saying, "Hey, world, I'm married." It is something that Suzanne gave me. What we talk about is our second marriage, and we are married to the same but 2 very different people. And so for me, this ring is a signification of redemption, of grace, of being able to start new, and really simplifying our relationship and saying both of us are now on a journey to health individually and also corporately as a couple. And so there's just a lot of meaning for that behind me. So is it going to be the highest appraised item on board? No, but for me, it's definitely the most valuable.
Okay, yours is so nice and sentimental.
Yeah, it's not going to be difficult now for you. Yeah.
Oh, no, it
doesn't have to be the same.
No, it's not the same, because actually I don't wear a wedding band, so it's not the same. But I wear my engagement ring on my other hand. But for me, it was bringing on all my, I love jewelry. I just love fun jewelry. I love fun earrings. And so I found a way to bring those on board because they make me happy, and nothing of real value, but it's what brings me joy. And so, and the funny thing is I don't really wear a lot of it anymore because of how we live life, but they're kind of all hanging on my wall, and I see them and they just make me happy. So,
and I like to think they make her happy because I gave her a lot of it. So.
Absolutely. That is very true. That is very true. I do have some pieces that have very strong sentimental value. So
if somebody doesn't know you and you're meeting for an intense, evening around the campfire somewhere in a nice area, and you tell them about, your life,
building and growing, well, as a couple, a family, a house, a company, then waving the kids goodbye because they grew up, downsizing with the house. What is one lesson that you would others to remember?
Wow.
I would say for me, it's the lesson we learned is communicate, talk about everything. There are no secrets as a couple. And I wish if I could go back to my 23-year-old self when I got married and sit that kid down, that's exactly what I would tell him is if you're going to trust anyone with your secrets, the good, the bad, the dark, and the really ugly, which we all have, it should be your spouse. And if you can do that, if you can be that vulnerable and authentic in that relationship, you stand a really good chance of having a thriving marriage. And so to me, through all of that, through our 26 years, it'll be 27 in September, 30 if we count dating and just hanging out as college students. I would say that's the lesson is right there. Just be vulnerable and open the kimono of your soul to the person that you are married to. And, you know, I'm not responsible for how she responds to what I tell her, and she's not responsible for how I respond to what she tells me, and she's not responsible for my happiness either. But when you have that deep, intimate connection with someone, the chances of you having that just awesome life go up exponentially.
Yeah. And I would say what you described and all of that was intimacy, and that goes far beyond sex. And an intimate relationship is everything that you just talked about. And yeah, and I would concur with everything you said, and just being a good listener and being open and not holding someone else responsible. Like, I'm 100% responsible for 50% of this relationship. And yeah, I really don't have anything to add to that. I think that was pretty clear and concise.
Well, maybe I'm going to draw a big circle and come back to that question. For now, I'm curious on what you do for the life design. Is that what you do for living? Is that how you pay your bills?
Not well. That's how we pay some of the bills. So I am.
Let me go back one step.
Yeah.
Moving out of the house, moving into an RV. Ooh, I almost disappeared. And well, working on the road. How did you manage to do that?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's been kind of a process that we have. I think we've pretty much nailed it now. You know, in the house, I had my office that I would go to, and Suzanne had a space she could work now? Where
in the back or
yeah,
the front?
it's here in the RV. We're talking right from it. There's a little desk back here in the back of the rig. But yeah, we had to figure that out. We had to have that process. Of course, there was a desk. So I was able to bring, we were able to bring our laptops, and I have a monitor sitting right here. Mm-hmm. But, getting on phone calls or getting on Zoom calls there's really only one place to go to not be seen in the background. Now, I think with COVID, what people have come to realize is, okay, so there's someone in the background, big deal. Doesn't mean there's no less value from the call.
Yeah.
So we just had to kind of work through some things. So usually we start the day where I say, we kind of review the calendars of, I've got this, and this. And then it's kind of a 15-minute warning of, hey, remember, I've got the Zoom call at this point. So I think we've kind of settled into something pretty reasonable and manageable. And I tell people, I work out of an RV. So you're going to see someone in the background. And most of the time, Suzanne in the background has her AirPods in anyway, listening to a podcast. So it's not that big of a deal, but it's worked out well. And we have a couple of hotspots that we use to stay connected to the internet. So I don't think it's been that big of a stretch. I thought it was going to be bigger, and it really hasn't been as bad as I thought it would be.
Yeah. And
so now coming back to the last question, what do you do to pay your bills?
Yeah. So I've been in marketing and sales for 25 years, in business to business, B2B. So I do a lot of consulting in that arena. Still, I work with several different clients. And then on the life design side, we have several coaching clients as well, where we are helping them work through how to design the life that they love to live every day, how to shed things that they don't need to hold on to, that they may have real difficult time letting go of, how to get unstuck. Many people we talk to feel very stuck in life. They've pursued a career path or chosen a path in life that really they let life design them. And so we help them get unstuck. And once they get back to who they were created to be, they can realize that anything is possible.
Can you give me an example?
I'll use my own.
What is a typical client, and what do you typically do with them, and what turns out after you talk to them?
Yeah, a typical client is someone usually, I would say probably 30 plus, who has lived some, what I'll say professional life. And it may be in a career that they're not enjoying, maybe in a job that they're not enjoying. And someone who's not saying, oh my God, I hate my life. What they're saying is, yeah, it's okay. And just okay means it's not very good. And they have an inkling that there's something better. So I hate to talk about a framework, a process, because every client is different. Every client comes with different needs. But the approach that we take is, first, I mentioned getting back to who we were created to be. And what I find is that so often we wrap our identities up in things that don't matter. For me, for years, I wrapped my identity into my profession. And the higher I was climbing the corporate ladder or how my businesses were doing, then I was great. I was good. If my businesses tanked, if I had a bad month, if I lost the big deal, I sucked. So what we start with is, let's get back to who you were created to be. Who are you at your core? Once we define that, and sometimes that takes, a lot of work. And we're not therapists, to be clear, but it takes a lot of work for people to embrace that core identity, the same one we had when we were kids, and shed some of the veneer and the complexity that we've layered on as adults. From there, we can then start to explore, what is your purpose? Why are you here on this earth? And then how can you apply that purpose in your current job, in your current relationships? And oftentimes what we find is when people realize that they can apply that purpose and their identity in that profession, their whole perception of their job changes, and they actually start to really love where they're at. There's also some who say, wow, I'm going down a wrong path. So then we say, great, now that you've understood your identity and your purpose, what gifts and talents do you have? So my purpose is to help people. That's it. I don't have like multiple purposes. I think we all have what Kelly Flanagan talks about is one note. My one note is to help people. I get to do that in my consulting, and we get to do that in our coaching. So if my idea was to help people and I said, I want to go create great music in this world, I would not be helping people because I suck as a musician and I have no musical talent. So we have to align our gifts and talents, and then we start to identify opportunities. And some of the hard outcomes we've seen is coached a client who was running an agency, dogged tired all the time. He ended up selling that agency, and within 6 months of selling has already met his earnout. We have another client who's increased his revenue by 33% while he's working less. We have people who are saying, you know what, my relationships are better, my thinking is better, my clarity is better. So it really runs the gamut, but we really try to work towards hard outcomes and define what does success look like to you? And then let's start at the bottom and work towards that mountaintop.
Yeah. I changed a while ago to mention that I'm a coach, and I say, no, I'm not a coach. Coaching is what I do.
Yes,
it's not
that's
who
exactly
I am.
Right. Yep.
And I'm doing it quite well. Nevertheless, I'm doing much more than coaching. So I am not a coach. It's just part of my life. And now guess what my next question will be.
I'm curious.
Who were the two of you as a kid? You said,
yeah, I did.
Coming
Yeah.
back to the
Mhm.
one we were when we used to be a kid. So the true self.
Yeah. I think I was pretty precocious as a child. I enjoyed adults and adult conversation, and was very just, I don't know, just very aware of I was just who I was. And it's been interesting actually I've been catching up with our travels with some really old friends, like have known me since elementary school. And it's interesting to hear somebody else's perspective about what you were like as a child. And this one friend who, oh my word, we were friends from the time we were like 9 till 17 when she moved away. And she was telling me about how in elementary school, we always sat next to each other, and the teacher would have us read aloud, and she always got stuck reading aloud after me. And she said, I hated that as a kid because you were so good at reading aloud. And then I had to follow you, and I felt like I was so horrible at it. And then when, it would carry on to the next kid, and I would kind of reach out and tap her and be like, Becky, you did such a good job. And I thought, I have no memory of any of that. And I'm sure my intentions were pure. I was just a child, but for her, it was so like maybe a little patronizing and where, I don't know, it was just fun to sort of hear someone else's perception of what we were like as a child. I was a bookworm. I loved books. I lived a full life through reading. Like reading just opened up everything. It's every possible world of imagination you can live out in your own head. And so books were a really huge part of my life. I'd bring home stacks of them from the library and just blow through them all. So that's probably the most significant thing about me as a kid, was just the ridiculous bookworm that I was, and how I wasn't escaping a life. I actually had a magical childhood. I grew up in Southern California. We were outdoors all the time. I don't remember wearing shoes a whole lot. We ran around barefoot unless they were roller skates. So I had this really happy childhood. And so I feel like that just helped me. I was never, I just was who I was. I didn't succumb to peer pressure. I just sort of lived out who I was as a kid and felt very confident in that.
And how does that match your today's life?
Today's life, well, I would say what I work with women is that I lost that sometime during my marriage. Like I lost Suzanne, and I got so caught up in trying to make life easy for everybody else and to make him happy and please him. And then I had these 4 kids within 6 years, and no clue what I was doing. I mean, I loved it, but I put my own identity and self-worth in the wrong things. And I remember sometime in my mid 40s, sort of looking in the mirror and thinking, my God, I liked you better at 22 than I like you at 44. I didn't like who I was anymore. And I didn't even realize how gradual the process of losing myself was, because along the way, I did have things that filled me up and and brought out who I was, like when I was teaching, obviously raising my kids. And yeah, so I think I've circled back around, like he talked about, to being that kid again. And
what did you precisely do?
Read a lot of books. I do actually. I read a lot of books. I did do several different therapeutic modalities. I've done talk therapy. I've done neurofeedback, which was the most effective therapy modality for me. And I just work really hard at it. Like I let go. First of all, I had to let go of everything. And if that meant losing this.
Everything?
Everything.
What about him?
Everything. Let go of holding.
Did you ask what about me? Yeah, we did like.
She said, "Let go of everything." So I said, "What about him?"
Yeah.
Did you let go?
I did actually.
We did for a while.
We separated for a while, and I knew I was attached. I was holding those attachments too tightly and trying to, clinging to, identifying with that. And so I did. I had to let go of everything in order to come back to the person that I was created to be. And yeah, that did mean letting go of Carlos for a period of time.
What was that moment that you realized that you had to do something and that you can do something? Because right now you said you were looking in the mirror and you didn't like who you saw. And I can relate to that. And maybe many of our listeners can, or at least some can relate to that as well. But what's next? I mean, how do you turn it around? Because there has to be, I suppose there has to be a shift in your mind when you say, ooh. Did you see that again? So yes. For our listeners, sometimes I'm disappearing in the background and then I'm all tropical forest like this. Ooh, and I put up my hand. So what was that moment when you
I think it was
knew you could do something?
For me, there wasn't one moment. I know that I had felt stuck for a long time, like that I didn't have options. Mm-hmm. And I feel like that was an excuse that I made out of my own fear. That I was more prepared to settle and live this life, that I really wasn't content in this relationship. It wasn't our relationship at a certain amount of time brought me more grief than it brought me joy, but I was like just content to just ride the wave.
Go on. Yeah.
Waiting for that magical someday when things would just magically turn around and be better. And so, but
do
there
you
was
know when that someday is? I'll write it in my calendar.
Yeah, exactly. Right. It's not a day of the week. But there was a time when he actually threw out the word divorce to me, and I was completely caught off guard. It actually, for me, it came out of the blue. And then I realized, I was like, that was kind of my first wake up. And that was my first realization of, I am not responsible for this man's happiness. And this is not a healthy marriage. And so that was my first realization. And that's when I first started going to therapy, because I was like, I need to take care of myself. I need to figure out what's going on with me, because I cannot control this. If he wants a divorce, we'll divorce. Like, I have no control over that. But I knew that I had been lost and I needed to find myself again. And that sounds so cliche, finding yourself, but it wasn't finding myself. It was going back to myself. And, we still had kids at home and I was worried about that. So I knew what I needed to do, but I still felt trapped. Like, okay, what? Okay. But I'm also a very task oriented person. So then I did start planning, because through that progression of 6 months or so, I was like, you know what? I don't want to be married to him. If this is the life that we're going to live, I'm not interested anymore.
And it's the only one you have. Yes.
Yeah. I'm like, just who he was at that time. He was not a pleasant person to be in a relationship with. And so I came to this place of, yeah. And I remember telling him, I'm like, yeah, you're right. I think we should divorce. Actually, I think we should divorce. And then it was just an absolute, and he can talk to that, when his whole facade of a world came crumbling down around him, that really lit the fire underneath me and just was like, yeah, I'm done. I want to be with someone who appreciates me as a person and loves and values me. And at that time, you're not that person. You're not that person. And that's primarily why we separated. And yeah.
Well, now I need to know what happened next. So you separated. You are leaving. You're leaving the guy that you don't want to live with, and now you're sitting both in front of me. So something happened.
Right? Something happened.
Yeah,
I'll let you take that.
I think a lot of things happened.
Yeah.
And I think first and foremost, we had to make the decision to get healthy as individuals. And that's one of the main reasons we separated. Mm-hmm. We also had to realize that we don't want to rebuild our first marriage, because the first marriage was so dysfunctional. And I want to be clear, it wasn't, we weren't like beating each other up or anything, but emotionally just disconnected. And so
many others. Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah, we made the decision to actually bury our first marriage.
Yeah, we divorced. It just wasn't
and
legal.
Treated as a death. And we actually went to this place where we love. It's a lake, and we threw our first wedding rings in the lake as a kind of a ceremonial divorce and a burial. And it was really, really emotional for both of us. It was just sad. So and then I can speak to me. Suzanne, I think, did a good job talking about her process. I had to realize that it's not selfish of me to want to get healthy for me and for no one else. And I had a therapist who said, if you're simply trying to get Suzanne and your kids back, I can't help you, because we'll be here in 5 years. You have to do this for you. And at the time he said that, I wanted to slap him, but I'm so glad he said it, because it got me to realize that the most important person from a health perspective is me. And the reason is if I'm not healthy emotionally, mentally, physically, spiritually, and relationally, then I can't bring the best of myself to my marriage. I can't bring the best of myself to my children, to my coaching clients, etc. So that was the big shift for me, is saying I have to get better because I want it. I have to get healthy because I want it. And I'm sick of living in a world where I'm stuck and I'm angry and I'm narcissistic, and the list goes on. And so that was my shift. And we both did that individual work without the expectation of, if I do these things, we'll get back together.
Yeah, if you're not in a healthy shape for yourself, you're either dead or an asshole. So you're not of much of help to others.
Well said.
How did you do that? Well, let me sort my thoughts. You're living together with a person that you realize you don't want to live together with. You separate is the relationship, knowing that it was dysfunctional. Then you're on your own, and you're not blaming the other one. How did you do that?
I'll be honest. I think for I want to say couple of months at least, I was blaming her.
Didn't work out, I guess.
And she was blaming me.
Yeah.
We just blamed each other because it's an easy scapegoat.
Mm-hmm.
If she had done all these things, if he had done all these things, and actually for me, it was a email. It was either an email or a text, but it was an email from my brother who, I mean, it was a long email. And at the time I did not want to read it. I didn't want to read, let me put it this way. I didn't want to receive it. But he said, pretty much, I'll sum it up. He said, you know, I've been walking through this with you for the last few months, and every conversation we have, all I hear about is the things that Suzanne is doing wrong. And he said, I'm waiting for you to take ownership of your stuff. And he said, stop.
Good brother.
Yeah. He said, stop blaming Suzanne for the choices you made. Stop putting, and he said, start, and he literally said, grow up and be a man and own your shit. And then I had a therapist who kept saying to me, don't focus on Suzanne. And what Suzanne just said, you're 100% responsible for 50% of this equation. And for me, I'm a recovering control freak. So I did want to control her response. I wanted to control, if I pull lever A, then this is what should happen. And I had to let that go. And so it was
well, no. Wait. Wait. You're saying this so easy. Well, I was a control freak. I wanted to control this, and I want this to happen, and I wanted to control the response. Well, and I had to let go of this. It sounds so easy.
No, it's not. It's not.
How?
It's not easy at all.
How did you let go of that?
Honestly, Floh, I'm still letting go of it. And not so much in our relationship anymore. But what I've had to realize is this is not a journey. This is not a destination. This is not someday I'm going to wake up and say, I don't have any control issues. Now, I know the origin of my control issues, which is helpful. But I'm also keenly aware, and just recently, like I told Suzanne, we were in a situation and I said, everything in me wants to just grab this thing and control it. So now I'm able to voice that where I feel it, because I feel it in my body. I feel it right here in my chest. And so the awareness of that and the ability to identify that is helpful. But to say, I don't ever overstep my bounds or get too far over my skis and control things, it is something that I realize I will probably struggle with the rest of my life. Now I'm getting better and I continue to get better. And Suzanne will also be like, babe, you're trying to control this. Let it go.
And you listen to me now when I say that.
So those are things that it's definitely not easy, but it's recognizable. And it took me months to get to a place to go, yeah, you're right. I'm a control freak. Now, being on that side of it, of recognition and everything, the fact that I feel so much freer and lighter in my spirit and in my soul, when I do start to control and I feel that tenseness and I feel that angst, I'm like, wow, that just feels unnatural. I don't like that. And so I have ways to express that now. But that took a lot of work.
How can you be more free when you control less?
I think you stop trying to orchestrate and, dare I say at times, manipulate the outcomes. And when you go into life and experience with no expectation. So here's a great example. We went to, and I haven't even shared this with Suzanne. So last week we took a ferry. We took a ferry over to this island here, and we're in the state of North Carolina. And so it was on the ocean. And we were told there's lots of sand dollars and wild horses. I grew up with horses, so I love horses. I've never seen wild horses in my life. All I wanted to do was see wild horses. It was like my 7-year-old self wanted to see wild horses. We got to the island. There were probably, the winds were so intense that the sand was whipping your legs. The waves were huge. It was cold. Suzanne was smart enough to bring a sweatshirt. I didn't. And the first quarter of a mile we're walking, I'm throwing an inner tantrum. This sucks. This isn't there's no horses here. And I'm having a pity party. And then I realized that I had built up this expectation that we were going to, walk on this island and see 40 wild horses galloping and, the music and all this stuff. And I just had to say to myself, dude, let it go. You're here with your wife. You're experiencing something new together. So what? It's windy and you may not see horses, but are you really going to spend these next 2 hours in this state and ruin this experience? And so I let it go. The wind didn't stop. She ended up finding several sand dollars. And at the end of a 1.5 mile walk down the beach, there were the wild horses. And I was so pumped. I was so excited. We came back. We had a great time, but I had a choice: either continue pouting, continue being upset because your expectation was missed, or just let go of the expectation and enjoy the here, the now, the experience and the presence. And even if we didn't see horses, it would have still been an amazing afternoon because we did something new together and we explored something we hadn't done before.
The wild horses.
Right.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Well, about 20 minutes ago, I said maybe I'm going to draw a big circle and we'll end up with the same question. And I just realized somehow we already did, because we talked about your job and what you're doing with life design, and now we unwrapped parts of your marriage. So it was I kept my promise.
That's right.
Are you working with couples as well?
Yes.
Life design?
We are.
Mm-hmm.
We are. And taking everything we've learned, the experiences we've had, and just really helping them, saying, you guys can have a thriving marriage. It's going to take work. We still work really hard at our marriage. But yeah, we love to work with couples, and it's so much fun to see them make that progress in their relationship.
And do you think that sometimes couples married because of the absolute wrong expectations, and that no matter what they do, the best is to be friends and marry somebody else?
Yeah, I do believe that. I think it's hard to not marry with that expectation. And I know in a lot of the work we've done and read that, there's a lot of people marry believing that someone's going to heal their wounds. And that right there is a setup for failure. Yeah. And I would say subconsciously, that's what Carlos did.
100%.
He didn't do it consciously.
The better half of the partner is the better half of me. Like, no. Nobody's going to complete you.
Absolutely not. I don't believe in that. I don't believe in soulmates. I don't believe in someone completing me. I'm complete on my own. I came to this marriage as a complete woman. I didn't need him, and I still don't need to have him in my life. If he chose to walk away, and we do approach our marriage differently now, I'm like, you are free to go but it deserves a conversation. You're not free to go mentally however you left before with no conversation. Like, I deserve a conversation. And so even that we hold loosely. I am happy with where we're at. I'm happy with where I'm at, and we live for today. Do I have some expectation that, we're going to still be together 30 years down the road? I hope that we are, but we may not be. I don't know what life has around the corner. So I do hold things a lot more loosely than I would have in my past, for sure.
We heard a phrase from one of our podcast guests, which we both loved, was when someone asked her husband, you guys have been married 25 years, what's the secret? Because this lady is very independent, very driven. And he said, the door to the bird cage is always open. And we both love that. And that's how we approach our relationship I would be so hurt and sad if Suzanne said, I want out. But she also knows, we both know if that's what you want, as much as it'll hurt, then go do that. But don't stay in this for some,
because you have to.
I won't do that anymore.
And we also agree that we are not responsible for each other's happiness. Happiness is a choice.
Yeah. This is so closely related to leadership. I'm doing a couple of leadership classes and leadership groups at the moment, and it's so often when they are talking about their company or their colleagues, I feel like doing a marriage consolation. Do you say that? Counseling? Well, you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Marriage advice. Because so often they think leading is about telling the other person what to do. No, that's parenting, that's forcing, that's pressure, that's dictatorship. That's not leadership. Leadership means to be so clear and so consistent with what you do that the other people follow you. Because if you want to lead by pressure, you always have to hold up the pressure. And there are only two reactions. So if somebody's pushing me to the side, either I'm going away and then the pressure is less, so I can feel free again. So the other one has to raise the pressure, or I'm going to push against the other one. And then you're going to have a fight. So true leadership means basically leading yourself in a way that other people want to follow you. And you just described the same for the marriage. It's not about controlling the other one or keeping the other one in the cage. It's saying, no, everything is wide open. You can go whenever you want to. Staying here, staying in the relationship, staying with me is a free choice because the two of us want it. That's too nice to be true for most people.
Well, I don't want someone to feel I don't want someone with me because they feel obligated to.
Yes.
Because we signed a piece of paper that said that you were. I don't want that anymore. And I felt for a long time he did stay because he felt obligated. I stayed because I felt obligated. And I want someone to be with me because they want to be with me. That's it. And if you don't want to be with me, then a piece of paper does not keep you here.
Well, and you said it's too nice to be true for everyone. And I think if you want it's the reality is there. It's not, we're not anything special.
It's a choice. Yes.
It's a choice. And you've just got to be, what we talk about with people, couples, individuals that we coach is you've got to be comfortable with being uncomfortable to get to that spot. And if you're not comfortable with being uncomfortable, we can't help you, much like my therapist told me when we first met. And so it's not out of reach for anyone. Mm-hmm. Is it nice? I would say it's beyond nice. It's awesome. But you're going to have to work at it. And I think our instant gratification culture says, oh, well, it's been 3 weeks. How come we're not thriving? Well, you didn't get to the place of dysfunction overnight. You're not going to heal it overnight.
Yeah.
And you can't bail when you're not happy immediately either. Like this takes a lot of work, but and the reality was we also realized it, even if we had divorced way back when.
How long did it take you to mess up the first marriage?
Oh my God.
It didn't happen overnight, right?
No, it didn't happen overnight.
It was a long time. It was over decades.
Mm-hmm.
And like Suzanne said, it wasn't It wasn't just like one day our marriage just imploded. It was death by 1,000 paper cuts.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this is how can you expect to turn it around in one
Exactly.
Exactly. And you still have to work at it. We were very clear that even if we had divorced at that point in time, if each of us did not work on ourselves, we would have just taken that same crap into another relationship. No question.
Yeah.
If you don't fix what's going on in your own soul, you can keep going from relationship to relationship, or you can have really superficial ones that last a year or two, whatever, and then it gets hard and you leave and you go to a next one. If that's the, but if you really want to do the hard,
the dude in your head, you're always keeping with
you. Absolutely. Yeah. So it still takes effort and, communication and constantly, and still working on ourselves as well.
One last question for our listeners. Let's imagine somebody is listening who feels that he or she is in a relationship out of obligation. And would like to turn it around, but feels as if the partner doesn't want that. What is a suggestion for that person? How to start?
I would first start is, why do you feel so tied to the obligation? What is it that's keeping you there? And then secondly, okay, so the kids, I can understand that. So secondly, then approach your partner. And one of the things we've adopted in our communication, before I get to that, the ability we have to create stories that are false narratives in our heads as human beings is jaw-dropping. We can create stories about the other person in a relationship that based on a look, on a tone, on a statement, and we run with these stories. And by the time we're done with this story, it is this big, awful, scary novel. And so what I would encourage is go to your partner and say, I need to have a conversation with you. And I want to have this conversation so I do not create a story in my head. I am feeling like we are in this marriage or staying in our marriage because of our children. Is that how you feel too?
Okay.
And just start the discussion that way. And we do that with each other. I will approach Suzanne and say, I want to mention this so I don't create a story in my head.
Yes, right? But you already practiced that. And so I completely understand what you are saying. I'm just
playing devil's advocate.
I have a conversation in mind where someone says, "Oh, yeah, of course," because the two of you already separated. You had your therapist, and then now you're coming back together on the same terms, and now you can talk to each other because that's part of what is the foundation of your relationship. But I didn't do that for the last 10 years. So if I start this now, I will scare the other one away. Nevertheless, you gave a precise answer to my question.
And I'm
thankful for that.
Yeah.
Again, like I talked about before, I started with me. When he first said divorce, I was like, well, he's clearly not happy in this relationship. I can't do anything about that. I don't know what he's going to do, but I know I can work on myself. And I didn't want to leave because of the kids. That was probably the biggest factor at that time. I still had 2 kids living at home. And that was my biggest fear so I just did the one thing that I'm like, what can I control? I can only control me. So I'm going to be the best me that I can be. I'm going to figure out how did we get to a point where he said the word divorce to me? How did that even happen? If he said it, it shouldn't have been that big of a surprise to me. And it was. So yes,
because you created your own story in your mind.
Exactly. We were clearly on 2 different pages. So
Sorry. And I will say one other thing to your point of we did the work, we did the therapy. Being vulnerable like that for me is still difficult. It's still uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Because
I
that's
know,
not,
I know
yeah,
that.
that's not how I'm wired. So early on, what I would say to her, and sometimes Suzanne will still say to me, and you can do this with your partner, I need to share some things with you. And it is really difficult for me to share this. It makes me uncomfortable. I feel vulnerable, and I'm worried about how you may respond. And that has nothing to do with you. It all has to do with me.
I just need you to listen.
I just need you to listen. That right there tells your partner, I'm very sensitive. I'm up here. I know your audience can't see me, but emotionally, I'm at a heightened level. And if you start the conversation that way, and I would say to Suzanne, this is really uncomfortable for me. And it may be something that is so easy to talk about. But if you're feeling that in your marriage, to have that conversation, if you truly love that person, you're going to have that hard conversation, as difficult as it is. So those are just a couple of other things that you can employ that we did as we were doing the work and still do today.
Yeah. And just listen well. Like I really try to listen to understand rather than listen to defend. Like if he's sharing something hard, I need to just, this isn't about you. This isn't about you, Suzanne. It's not about you. Just let him share. It's not about you. And so there were many things, and we've done that. I'm like, babe, this is not about you. I'm just sharing something with you. Take yourself out of it. And so it was a lot of work, and there were some it was hard to do it, but I had spent so many years staying silent, and I'm not willing to do that anymore. And we just had to do it. If this thing was going to survive, we had to do it. And again, I figured I might as well take a chance on you rather than just go and take the same crap to somebody else. Like I'd rather give this a chance, because we did always love and care about each other and both wanted to make it work. So if you really want something bad enough, you will do whatever you have to do, even if it's hard and uncomfortable.
A coach of mine said two things that are matching very well what you just said. One is the most people are not listening; they are preparing their own answer.
Absolutely.
So whenever you, as a listener of this podcast now, if you know any of these situations, be it your kids, your partner, your parents, your colleagues, if you want to give the other one a chance, ask them a question and listen to the answer without preparing your next statement. And the other thing is, the most toxic thing for a conversation is mind reading. Thinking you know what the other one actually meant to say. And there's only one thing that is even worse, and that is reverse mind reading. You know what I wanted to say.
Yeah.
So be precise in what you say. Be precise in what you listen or what you hear, and then respond to exactly what I heard is did you mean that?
Yeah.
And this is bringing it down to what you just said.
Couldn't have said it better.
Right.
Well, so if somebody's interested in that, I suppose they find contact details at carlosandsusanne.com.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, they do. They can go there. They can submit. We are also doing free, zero obligation, no sales pitch, but up to 90-minute coaching sessions as a way to give back to help people. Mm-hmm. So there's a little button there on the site, right on the homepage for a free coaching consultation, or they can just email us as well.
Yeah, perfect. And if you like what Carlos and Suzanne are openly sharing about their
2 marriages, and you are not ready for a conversation yet, you can listen to the Life Design podcast, which has awesome guests.
Yes,
Yes.
it does.
And, well, thank you for being so open. Thank you for being so much you. I hope we have the chance some after Corona meeting somewhere around this globe.
Absolutely.
And I hope to stay in contact with you.
We would like that very much. Thanks so much for having us, Floh. Really, really appreciated the conversation.
Yeah, thank you. Take care. And you, my listeners, I talk to you in a week.